Hi everyone, this is AutoML training community meetings on 16th of June, US friendly time zone. I will start with sharing my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay,
yep.
Great. The first item that I want to discuss about the summit. So we're still trying to involve new people and ask to submit the proposal. We have a couple of responses already. So we are planning to cover all of these responses after we finalize the submission part. I don't know, do we want to extend it to end of this week? Or should we stop accepting the proposals on 18th of June? What do you think?
I think we should stick to that, and
okay.
Yeah, so that way it would be better. Let's see once the deadline gets over.
Okay. Yeah, to just remind you that maybe not all of you are aware of it, but we're planning to have a summit on end of June, but I think it may be like start of July because we don't have a lot of time. And we really want to discuss a lot of use cases and production ready environment 101 tutorials regarding to training and AutoML. So we really want to hear the production usage of Kubeflow, and especially like distributed training. And if you're willing to share this to the community, or you're willing to ask community for the new proposals and for the new feature that you want to see in training or in AutoML, you're welcome to submit this proposal. You can select like whatever time you want to present. So it can be super short if you want to just talk about one feature. And because after that, we are like finalizing the results and to see how we can arrange it across different time zones, because we have people from Asia and US, and it's hard to cover all of these time zones. Overall, yeah, let's try to close this survey on this Friday and finalize the submission there. If you have any questions, or we can move forward? Okay, great. The next thing, which is finally, we created the YouTube channel for our recording, which is like very cool. And let me share the link. So we have, I think, 6 or yeah, around 7 recordings from 10th of March. We had a really cool presentations there, especially from the training side. And I think soon we will submit a couple of new operators in Kubeflow. So if you just want to see what is the current progress from the training operators perspective and what is our roadmap for KDIP, I highly recommend you to watch some of them. And I will put the link here. So for now, I think we will stick with this playlist because we still don't have the access to the Kubeflow channel, unfortunately, and the work in progress there to allow working groups uploading the recordings directly to Kubeflow YouTube channel officially. Until this, we will use just our common YouTube channel to upload the recordings to show community our progress. Yeah, and also we have a link there at the top of our notes. So if you just want to see the past recordings, you can always go to this playlist. So next step, I want to discuss about the new release. We made like the new KDIP release for Kubeflow 1.3.1. It is like 0.11.1 release. I have already like pushed the images to Docker Hub. Also, let me put the link to the agenda. So the images in Docker Hub are updated, and if you want to try, you can use it. In this release, we haven't like delivered a lot of new features, but overall we fixed some problems with manifest, and we're supporting customize greater than I think 1.3. So the latest version of customize is supported, and also like some minor changes there. But overall, we will use this release for Kubeflow 1.3.1. Yeah, and all of the new features that we have already submitted in master, I think we will deliver them in the next release, like 0.12. and like new UI as well. Any questions here, or we can move forward? Okay, great. Yeah, I think also I really want to discuss about the release process, but I think it will be covered in the part of the testing infrastructure before discussing the UI changes. So, Cameron, is it fine if you just give a quick introduction? How does it work in Kubeflow currently? To just tell us, because go ahead.
I missed the question. So, so what?
Yeah, so the main problem is here, why I just put the items there, that we have to migrate from KiSonet on KDP repository and on training side as well. So this touching all of the operators. And we're still in our test infrastructure, we're still using KiSonet to deploy Argo workflows. So this is the KiSonet library. And we really need to think what is the next step would be and how we want to migrate from this legacy implementation of testing. Because the problem is like KiSonet was using Kubeflow 2 years ago, and we really need to migrate from this implementation. And the question is like, as I know, like in Kubeflow, you're using the Python script to run the Argo workflows, right? Maybe you can just explain how does it work right now in Kubeflow?
Yeah, sure. First of all,
do you want to share your screen? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can give you.
It will be easier.
Give me a second. Where is it? Oh, it's over here. You need to allow attendee screen sharing.
Can you try
again? Okay. Can you see my window? All right. So actually, before I jump into how we run our tests, a small comment to bring the context I have with regard to testing. So most of the working groups like KF serving, actually everyone except pipelines, because pipelines have their own proud cluster with Google platform. But all of the other, we're using the shared infrastructure from AWS. So they have a proud cluster set up, and once we have a PR, the GitHub will set a webhook and will trigger the proud cluster, and the proud cluster uses an image which is generated from the Kubeflow testing repo, and the code from this repo that gets triggered for the image that the proud cluster runs, it will actually go to this directory, check the proud config YAML, and then see what to do and how to generate the Argo flow, either with KSONet or with Python. This is the general gist. There is an effort. I've heard it from the KF serving people. The KF serving people right now are really using the infrastructure because they also run end-to-end tests. So they generate an Argo workflow. They also do it with KSONet, but this Argo workflow also creates another EKS cluster so they can run end-to-end tests over there. So they install Istio. They do a pretty heavy usage.
We follow the same design actually.
Hmm?
We follow the same design. Sorry for interrupting you. So in KDP, we're following the same.
So you're also creating new cluster whenever Prow runs?
Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. I'll take a look. Actually, I'm going to ask you in a second then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So there was also an effort from Yao Xiao to also use Tekton instead of Argo. Generally, what I understand is that the IBM folks use Tekton a lot internally. That's why we also have a Pipelines Tekton project. So this is an effort to also use Tekton with the testing infra, which is awesome. I don't have any preference whether we use Argo or not, but I haven't seen any code up to now that uses Tekton instead of Argo. So when we for notebooks needed to take the decision, okay, how do we run the tests? We only had the previous Argo workflows, so we just created some Python scripts to generate the Argo workflow. And this is just what we did. So, but to have it in the back of your head that there is also an effort to support Tekton, but I'm not sure what the progress is there. We could ask the key serving people to see if it would make sense for all of us to use Tekton, but for now I haven't heard of anything. So
okay. I think the main problem there that if we are planning to use the advantages of using Tekton is like reusability, right? So we can predefine the templates and just reuse them for the different working groups, like for deploying Kubeflow, for example, or for, I don't know, accessing some Kubernetes resources. But the problem that I do have here that what is the point of using Tekton if we deploying this cluster from scratch? So every time that users submit the commit, we're deploying the new cluster. And if we're willing to use Tekton, do we want to also deploy some sort of the templates after we deploying the cluster? So this is the question: do we really need it? And will it make it easier to submit similar workflows?
I have some gaps here, so I'd like to ask some questions to also understand.
Okay.
For Katib, the process I have in mind is that we will have it the Prow cluster will parse this file, and then it will create an Argo submit an Argo flow, and this Argo flow is the test we want to run. But for Katib, you mentioned that inside this Argo flow, you actually create a different cluster.
Yes. Yes. So okay. Yeah, basically we have one Argo workflow which is running on the one cluster in AWS. So this is like the central cluster for the whole Kubeflow infrastructure, and this is also running in AWS. And this cluster is running Argo workflow. So, and this Argo workflow submitting another cluster because this cluster has the permission, the correct permission. So yes, I think in that case, in this cluster, we can define some sort of the templates, but this cluster currently does not support Tekton at all. So we only, I believe we only have the Argo, which is running there, from my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, okay, go ahead.
Give me a second to wrap my head around this. So there's one step in the Argo workflow in the first AWS cluster that says create with the CLI of EKS, create a different cluster, wait to get the kubeconfig file, yada yada, and then the next step of the graph has the kubeconfig and applies things to that cluster, right?
Yes, because we're providing the correct config to this cluster that we create.
Okay. Yeah. So and as you mentioned, the pros of using Tekton is that we can have some templates of the Argo workflows that will be generated in our clusters.
Yes. So one question. So currently you're using Python script instead of Kisonet. So in this Python script, are you just simply submit the Argo workflow and that's it?
Correct. This is where we have the code.
Okay.
So in the CI directory, we have a common helper file that actually defines a class that can generate an Argo workflow YAML.
Okay.
And this is the template that we use, and all of the other files will then use this very basic template and add some steps like, for example, for our Jupyter Web App, it will add a step to run to test if the image can be built with Canico. It will add another step to install the node modules and try to run some tests, etc. So yeah, we have a basic template defined in a Python class and define other tasks with code. This is what we currently do.
Okay, so and you're using Kubernetes API to submit this Argo workflow, right? In your
this is
Python script.
Already parsed the initial Prow cluster. This cluster is running a code from the Kubeflow testing repo. And the code over there is responsible for actually then importing this code of ours and running it. And the common code, so the image in the Prow cluster will use our code to get the YAML, and then it will apply it. It will wait until the Argo workflow is done. And once this is done, it will update also GitHub.
Okay.
So,
And so they have the API which can eventually receive the Argo workflow, right? And submit this Argo workflow to Kubernetes cluster. Is it correct?
yes.
Maybe you can show in the script where exactly you're submitting this Argo workflow. For example, for Jupyter Web App.
Wait a minute, because this was a little tangled.
Yeah, sure.
Let me try and give my best. So this is the code. Once I submit the pull request, the Prow cluster in AWS gets triggered, and it runs a pod with an image with the Python code over here. And specifically, it runs this Python file. And this Python file, it will once the pod runs this code, it knows from which repo for what pull request and all of this information. So based on that, it will then, where is it? It will start parsing the configuration file. Check. Yeah, it will check and then it will actually, yeah, the code from this Prow cluster will check the actual Prow config to find the workflows defined. Yeah. And later on, give me a second, because my memory is a little bit, yeah, for each workflow, I think it was over here, it would submit the workflows. Give me a sec.
Yeah, in general, this is like the part of the KeySonet, because we're using the same Python script to submit the KeySonet workflow. So once we, because this is the part of the entry point for the testing repo, for the actually testing. Yeah, can I also like share my screen? I will just show you how the script will run. Yeah, just 1 second, because I think maybe to be precise here, from my understanding, that as this script is running by Docker file. And yeah, let me search it, run E2E workflow. Yeah, so the name is, 1 second.
The first one?
Yeah, the first one, you mean?
And then on the
this one,
yeah.
Yeah, so from my understanding, we have Docker file, which is eventually should run this script. So yeah, Docker file. I just try to remember where is the Docker file located, because it should be like in AWS eventually. Okay, Docker file testing. Yeah, 1 second. Docker building Docker images. Yeah, because it definitely should be. I remember that we created a Docker file for our testing. Yeah, 1 second.
Maybe this Docker file was used from a step in the Argo workflow.
Yes, because I'm talking about this this actual image, Kubeflow testing. There's this one. So this is the worker image, which is eventually run the workflow from Argo.
Yeah, right? Correct.
So I'm just trying to see where we define this Docker file. I'm pretty sure that somewhere in testing repo we will define. But okay, never mind. So eventually, like your Python script, just a wrapper to submit the Argo workflow to this run E2E workflow, right? So this like entry point for this Python script, right?
Correct. Right. It just instead of using KSonet to submit the Argo, it uses Python to submit the Argo.
Okay, I see.
What is your limitation that you're trying to think if it will work?
I mean, it will definitely work if the current API is supporting the Python scripts there, if the current API of Kubeflow testing. But like, does it scale to all of the working groups? And does it make sense to use just the Python script instead of KeySonnet for us? At least for now, at least like to move away from KeySonnet.
I think it's a very straightforward step. What's only needed is to actually define what's the graph. When the first step is to define what graph is going to be submitted. Actually, I think that for Katib, in the prow config of your repository, you only have one test for any component that gets modified.
Yes. So do you mean
are you generating the exact same Argo workflow, the Argo graph, whenever a component, whenever it gets triggered? There's only one case.
Yes.
One workflow.
Yes. Yeah. We have currently one workflow because we do not have the post submit workflow right now. So we have only pre-submit in a workflow.
So the question then, in order to evaluate if we can change it, is to check, have the actual YAML that gets submitted, the Argo workflow, this YAML, and see if we can recreate it using the common code in the Kubeflow repo, or what would be the effort to extend the base class of the Argo object to be able to create this workflow.
Yeah. So the disadvantages there, if we just have a YAML, we would not possible to use the variables, for example, like registries and all of these kind of variables that we do have here, like test worker image, or for example, like you also, I think, if you take a look at the pro config, we also have a registry here, which we are using for our images. So if we just submit a YAML, it is not possible to substitute these variables in the YAML.
It will be possible, right? Because the code first the code creates an object in the memory that gets translated to YAML. It doesn't take a YAML and submit it. So we can parameterize many aspects of the graph, although we will need to see which parts we will need to parameterize to have a more clear picture about it.
In that case, we will require to have this Python as well, like Python SDK to submit these YAMLs. So I don't know. The question, like, so what is your vision, the next step for, at least for the working group, like for the manifest and for the notebooks? Do you have any ideas how you will construct your testing infrastructure?
I think we're pretty good with how it's working right now for notebooks, and for manifest, most probably I'm just going to reuse the common code for defining the Argo workflow and define tests over there as well.
Okay, and this Python script, can it be, so we can share it across different components, right? We are planning to share it, right?
It's already shareable. The code that will be triggered from Kubeflow Katib can use the code from the Kubeflow repo.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so I think the first step should be definitely just migrating from KeySonnet, not maybe using Tekton, because Tekton can be the next step. It's like more complicated because it will require some changes for the other working groups as well. Okay, I don't know what other things. So should we try to use the same Python script to submit these workflows?
For me, it makes sense. It makes sense in order to move away from KSonnet. Now, for further next steps, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to see if the Tekton folks will do something else. But I think it's one good alternative right now to get away from KSonnet, because either way, the current worker image we have that parses the prow config YAML supports either KSonnet or Python.
Okay.
So.
Oh, so you mean the current workflow is supporting the Python, right? The Python entry point. I mean, like the Python. Yeah, like not using KSonnet, but using just the Python script. I see.
I think a
Okay.
good next step here,
Mhm.
I can refresh my memory as much as I can,
Mhm.
and also have a meeting with Yao from AWS to discuss about it. And
Mhm.
I can also explain that, hey, here's how we've configured. Also, although Yao has a good idea because we're going through back and forth a lot with him when we were designing it.
Okay.
So and at the same time, we can also see what is the YAML for cat that
Mhm.
gets the
Mhm.
Argo graph that gets submitted with for Katib, and then we can
Mhm.
evaluate. Oh, it's gonna be really easy to use Python to submit the same graph with a Python script instead of
Okay.
KSONet.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we can get some feedback from Yao. Yeah, because I think this is the Docker file. I finally found it. So eventually, like this is like the entry point for our Docker, for our worker. So the worker that I was talking about before. So the worker is I'm talking about like this this image, and I'm pretty sure you're using the same image for your Python scripts.
Yeah. What was the? Let me check the file. It was. Yeah. Now I remember. And this
Mhm.
bash script will then trigger the Python code if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
run workflows. So eventually, I think if we go to images and if we go to run workflow script, yeah, so this script is running run E2E workflow with AWS
Yeah.
parameters. Yeah,
Correct.
so let's try to ping Yao about the Python script because I really want to be consistent across as I said before, to be consistent across different working groups. And the question that if we're planning to use like Python scripts, that probably we should have like the centralized library to be able to just follow the same patterns.
Okay.
Yeah, to
So
construct the Argo workflows.
I think the next let's have these next two actions to move forward with this.
Yeah,
Let's
sure.
ping Yao about it. Tell him, hey, we want to discuss about
Mhm.
how we want to move away from KSONet, and we're evaluating a Python script.
Mhm.
Give
Mhm.
us your input about what we could do. We
Mhm.
could mention that we're doing the same thing for notebooks, so let's discuss if it makes sense to reuse it.
Mhm.
And at the same time, let's also get the YAML that will be submitted after from the KSONet app.
Yeah. Do you mean like the Argo workflow YAML, right?
The Argo workflow YAML, exactly.
Okay.
Because this is what the Python script is also going to be generating.
Yeah.
So in order to evaluate if the common code from the Kubeflow library can, out of the box, help us submit such a graph.
Yeah, I agree. And the question is like, do we want to have some sort of the substitution parameters there, and we can apply them from the, for example, like parameters in pro.config. I'm talking about like this.
I think that, yeah, even for the Python script, we can pass some parameters, but this is one of the
Yeah.
things, let's write it down to ask Yao as well. Can we have
Okay.
also parameters for the Python scripts?
Okay. Yes.
If you can give me the Argo workflow that gets submitted right now for the YAML, I can help evaluate. We're gonna have these problems with our code, or we need to extend it this way. So we can also once we have this, we can then also go to Yao and tell him, this is where we are with notebooks. This is where we'll go with Katib. Do you have any better suggestions? And get his feedback as well.
Okay. Okay. Yes, because this is important. This will be probably should be usable for release infrastructure. Because for the release, we're still using the hand script in Katib, and I don't know, for the release, is it possible to also like evaluate these scripts and push images?
I'll ask Yanis about it. Yes, what we do is that we have in Kubeflow, we have a specific folder in the top directory that it's called releasing.
Okay.
And whenever a commit gets submitted there, there is one version file over there,
Okay.
which
This one, do you mean?
yes, correct. So once someone creates a PR and updates the file in that repo, in that directory, we generate a very specific Argo workflow that will build every image and push it with that name. So this is how we do releasing for Kubeflow. So once we have RC1, for example, we would cut a new branch and we would make a PR there for RC1. And the new Argo workflow that would be generated would build all the images and push them with this tag.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, and how you actually sending this information to your Argo workflow? I'm talking about like how you define it as a parameter as the input of your Argo workflow.
It's not an input to the Argo workflow. Once the Argo workflow runs, it will check. It will take a look at the code of the pull request and will see that, oh, the version file has this value. Let me open the file.
Oh, okay, I see. So do you have the? Go ahead.
But I'll put an asterisk over there, and let me add add it to the notes. I want to make sure we also write this down.
Do you have the version file somewhere? Yeah, is it? Oh, it's here, right? I see. Yeah. And if you just take a look in the other branch, I will see the different version, right? Yeah, I see. Yeah. So this is the input, the version for your particular release, right?
Correct.
We could try to follow the same patterns in Katie. What do others think? Will it work for us to run our release script with this input parameter?
Yeah. So my opinion would be, so for example, yeah, this sounds good for the release process, but again, like for the testing, as Kimonos was saying, right, I think other than moving away from the outdated case on it, we definitely have to. Other than that, do we really have a pressing need for changing to Tecton or anything else? Something, because things are working and we are able to add any more, like we can add any test possible. So do we, other than moving away from KSONet, I'm not sure whether we have to think about having a common testing framework for all working groups, etc. Because end of it, finally, that will be a long process, and then each working group has their own capabilities, and they might move away from a common infra, right, in the future. So we have no control over that. So yeah, this is my thought on it.
Yeah, I think this is a good point, because we can't be confident that in the future the release process will be consistent across different working groups.
Right. So definitely we have to move away from KSONet, which is definitely a need, because that is very outdated. Other than that, we have to really see case by case where what is the extra thing to be added for having the testing, improving the testing part. I personally, I'm not sure whether do we have any other requirements as such where like the current testing infra doesn't scale. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Yes, because I can say right now what we can't support with Argo workflow. It's more about like usability across different working groups and the process of implementation, the new, for example, like support new training operator. But if we have the central, because I think back to the previous days, all of the actually new repositories, they're trying to follow the same workflows for the testing, right? So they created
but again, that was pre-working group era, right? So after working groups were created, each of the working groups have moved away from the common infra part. Like they, as I think, like care serving might actually move to a different infra in the future. So I'm not sure whether we should tie to a particular working group. Instead, what it is best for running our test, I think that should be prioritized. Like, just a thought on that.
Okay. So the next step, what will be the action? Like try to cooperate with Yao and ask him, is it possible to use Python script to construct this Argo workflow and submit this Argo workflow to the Pro cluster, right?
Yeah.
Okay. For the release, I'm still. Go ahead.
One quick question to Jognu. Have you also heard discussions about maybe about thinking to migrating to a different testing platform from away from AWS? Have you heard anything?
Yes. So, but again, that discussion was going on for a long time. Nothing has happened yet, but I've heard about that. Even Dan was saying once regarding that, like they are actually looking for something else. But again, finally, I think because of the efforts required, finally they all went to the same infra. So that's the reason I told that I'm not sure whether we would be able to get to a common infra at some point. I'm saying might be, but each working group might decide in a different way based on their requirements. End of it, right? Like finally, that repository should run and run all the tests in a scalable way. So I'm not sure whether it is a clever decision to think about a common infra. I'm saying it might work, it might not. So just a thought on it. Yeah.
So to rephrase a little bit to make sure I'm synced, and the part that you're worried is that, let's say that in a year from now, the notebooks working group that has the common code decides to use a completely different infra, which means that most of its common code would change, and this would also break the Kati repo, which was using the common code, which will still use AWS.
Exactly. See, for example, if we stop, as we said, like if we stop maintaining the Kubeflow testing code somehow, right? Like say if we are moved to a different framework, all the repositories which would be depending on that particular testing repo will get isolated, right? So they have to maintain then the common repo. So I think we had the same discussion when we had who would be responsible for the testing repository, right? And then end of it, when Jeremy was there, we decided to actually have let working groups handle that instead of having a common testing working group, because like no one was volunteering to be in that testing working group handling all the test framework. So end of it, the responsibilities were handed back to working group to manage their test infra separately.
So just a comment from the notebooks working group perspective is that we're planning to use for as long as possible the common infra provided by the Kubeflow testing repo and the testing working group. But I think that what you said makes a lot of sense, and what we could do here is ask the AWS folks, are you planning to keep investing on the testing platform? Do you think that this might get deprecated? Because for notebooks, as long as they will be supporting and providing the platform, we don't have a reason to change for the time being to make any switch. But I think this is a good question to ask Yao and the AWS people.
Right.
I agree, but what other options do we have if the AWS will not be supported more? I mean, not in general, it's working, but not will be implement new features or reusability. What's our plan?
I honestly don't know. Even for notebooks, if they would tell me tomorrow we're deprecating, we're archiving the repo, we don't put any effort, I don't know what other options I would have at that point.
Right. I think this needs a bigger discussion, but the key point is exactly that, right? See, unless we have a working group or set of people who will be maintaining the common testing infra, we definitely cannot guarantee that is going to work for all the repositories, right? Like end of it, that responsibility is basically to a working group. Working group has to ensure that it actually works on all the test a framework that a working group has written. So it is a bit tricky, but I'm saying like if it works right now, I'm saying we should be happy to take it. But I'm saying let's not decide on the fact that, oh, we have something there and then because of that we are going to take it, right? I'm saying let's take a judicious decision there, whether it will help in the future too.
Okay. Yeah, because again, like if maybe for us, I'm talking about like KD perspective, it may be easier for the release using just the GitHub Actions, for example, because we are not running the fancy tests for the release. We just build the images and push them through the repositories. And to be able to set up this release part, we can just ask for the admin permission temporarily and just set up the Docker credentials there. And we would able to create this release process using GitHub Actions, for example. I don't know, just one thought. But okay, let's try to ping Yao and to see what is the AWS vision on this release on the infra. Okay, let's move forward to the UI discussion. So do you want to step?
Yeah. I was starting to evaluate the effort, what efforts we would like to have for 1.4, which I think that aside from the UI changes about how to handle the config maps for the trial templates, this is one part where we are also discussing about the authorization. Should they live in one space or the other? But there are some other points, like we're discussing about adding support for authorization mechanisms to use subject access reviews, which is currently not supported in the Go backend, or getting logs from the Go backend to show logs from the suggestion CR for the pod running the suggestion. What I would like to also ask you, what do you think, is that right now, from my point of view as a developer, I'm not that accustomed with Golang. So if we would like to keep on maintaining the Go backend, I'd like to ask some help with to how to coordinate, and I'll tell you, okay, we'll need to do these features, authorization with subject access reviews. I'm not so much accustomed with Go, so I'll have to ask someone else to implement this authorization. So but it can be, for me, it can be very easy to create a Python backend like the other web apps we have that will out of the box have this functionality with authorization reviews, etc. And I think if we'd like to discuss this, it would be now a good point where we're doing very basic things. So I'd like to hear what would you think about such a move? Would you like it? Would you prefer to maintain where we are? How would you like to? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think like implementing subject access review to the Go backend is not like big of a deal. The question is like, what is the advantages and what disadvantages we would have using the rewriting all of the backends using Python. So the question is, do we really need to do it? And what is the engineering effort it will require, right? Because we need to spend much time to fixing the front end as well. So the question is like, what is the advantages we would have if we just migrate to the Python backend?
The advantages is that it's going to be using the same common code with the other web apps. So
do we have common code for the backend?
Yeah, correct. It's the components, CRUD web apps, and the common and backend. So both the three web apps there and the one for Kiev serving, they're all using this common code. So yeah, the immediate pros here is that any changes, security updates we do for one web app can be utilized from all the other web apps.
Okay.
And the next one, for me as a developer, it would be easier to work with Python rather than Go. The effort to migrate, it would be, I can create also an issue to also help us evaluate this effort and say, okay, these are the routes, this is what we have to do. But at this point, it can be really easy because right now, what the UI, the new UI does is only list, delete, and get experiments, the same list trials, and show some config maps, which is really easy to add routes for that.
Yep.
but I might be missing something, so I don't want to really take a quick step here. So this is why I'd like to also create an issue and ask if you think there are more advanced use cases that the backend is doing right now that we could not do with Python, or it would require effort. But I just wanted to raise this thought that we could evaluate.
So
such a
Andre,
performance.
so how many APIs do we have right now? How many are we using? Like I think Monas can, I think.
Yeah, let me
how
open
many
to show you.
API routes are being used in Go right now?
I think it's around 10 to, let me open it, 1 second. So we're using these APIs.
Okay.
So it is, I don't know how many, 8? Oh, no, not 8. Okay. Yeah, so I think the all these APIs, like 15 API, but all of these APIs, like more about listing. Yes, the most complicated one will be related to the NAS, because the NAS is actually constructing the graph that we discussed before, if you remember, because it is using, I think, GraphViz package from Go.
Okay. I was missing this info. We'll need to add to evaluate this as well. Okay.
Yeah. So overall, yeah, it's using Go GraphViz, and it's constructing the graph to sending this to our front end.
Quick question over here. So the backend, the backend is the one that generates the image to send to the UI to show.
It's actually not the image. It's because we it's need to generate because we're using the same actually package from the JavaScript and from the Go, but we need to construct this image. This this graph is in the Go and sending this as the string to like in the post request basically. But overall, yeah, this can be done. I think I'm pretty sure that GraphViz has like Python packages. So because we need to make sure that we can construct, or maybe we can use another library. I don't know. But overall, yes, it's just constructing the graph as a string. So because GraphViz, they have a specific template, like specific language to parse the image.
Okay, so this route, we will definitely need to evaluate what's going to be the effort to use this. I think this, as you mentioned, this is the most complicated routes. The other ones will maybe do some parsing and submit, or use the Kubernetes library.
Yeah, let me double check it again. So yeah, submitting, fetching, deletion. Yeah, so fetching trial templates. Yeah, so we have some sort of the backend view of trial. If you're like trying to implement the trial template config maps, we have some sort of the, what is it? Yeah, so it's somewhere here. We have some sort of the types, like default types that we are using in our API calls. So for example, like experiment view, trial template data view, but we can do the same in Python, I believe, right? So the question is like, again, from the engineering standpoint, do we really need to spend right now, because the front end is still not ready, right? To migrating this. Do we want to prioritize work on the backend side or prioritize work on the front end side for the 1.4 Kubeflow?
Kimona, so one question. So isn't it easier here to actually add the routes that, for example, all the things which are missing right now in Go, to implement that instead of moving away from Go to Python?
I missed the.
Yeah. So my question is, isn't it easy to implement the missing features in Go currently than moving, which will be a bigger effort to move everything from Go to Python, right? Say, for example, if you need help in having like a specific route, we could actually add that in Go, which is not a big problem, right?
I think it's more about security question. So this is the main, so the subject access review, is it like hard to implement, and what is the, like, from the engineering standpoint?
So it's mostly. I'll try to answer to both of the questions. For the technical about the authorization, it's not really difficult. You just first need to submit a authorization and subject access review is just a Kubernetes object. So for every action in the UI, we just need to submit an object and ask, has the user permissions? And after that, handle this is all it takes.
Oh, okay.
So it's not too much of an engineering effort. I guess we could also have it in a common code someplace. But, and to answer to Jofnu's question, if you can also allocate some cycles to help with that, then sure, I don't have an issue. But my initial proposition is that for me, it's going to be more difficult to help add these features. But if you can also help to keep on maintaining and adding these features, then I'm more than fine with keep on what we have.
So other than the subject access review, are there any other things missing right now?
I think logging, right? Logging as well is missing here. Parsing the logs that you are doing for KF serving, right?
Yeah, but this can, yeah, parsing the logs. Although this is, we're not doing something sophisticated for the Python. We just use the client library and return the logs.
Okay, okay. Go, you mean like, oh, I see. Just the Kubernetes Go client library, right? Okay.
Correct. And then the next is some optimizations we could do for listing big resources. But I think that the biggest, yeah, it's the authorization, how handle authorization. This is right now the biggest discrepancy between the Khatib with Go and with the other web apps, that it doesn't do the authorization.
I see.
Let's just create an issue, and can you please just explain what is currently missing, and we just can figure out what is the engineering kind of effort on it. Yeah, but from my understanding, like this is not the high priority for the Kubeflow 1.4. If it's like, yeah, speaking about the authorization is the high priority, I agree. But if it's just submitting the Kubernetes object, I think we can implement it in the current backend. But if like it will require some additional changes, yeah, we might need to think how we can change it to Python.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Anything else on the UI that you want to ask us?
In the issue, so let's not take too much time here.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, because if we can share the common library, it might be useful for us. But again, like, what is the pros and cons we will get by using this, and how much time it will take to migrate all of the APIs there? Okay, sounds great. Any questions, comments that you have, and want to discuss before we wrap up? Yeah, and about the UI, so one last question from my side. So how much time it will actually take, do you know, when you have time to implement all these crucial features before 1.4 from the Khatib standpoint?
I will start having a lot of available cycles by the mid of the next week. So this is where I'm planning. I'll try to keep on discussing on the issues, so we decide on what we want to implement. But from about next Wednesday is where I have more cycles, so I can, once we have agreed, I can start implementing and submit things. But for the next week, I'll mostly be replying to ensure we are synced with what we want to do.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for this effort. And I think I will also like submit the APR to, if we discussed before, to update the image by using the new UI by default, right? For the master branch. Okay, great. Any last comments, questions?
Oh yeah, I want to ask this for the submit. Is it okay if I actually submit a proposal about to go over the new UI, so we can show users, hey, this is what we currently have, here's a walkthrough around of it? Or would you like to give it more on users and how they use the Khatib, etc.?
Yeah, it would be awesome. I think one of the session that is related to the UI, we can just you can step forward and just explain all of the features there, and we will have we definitely will have a couple of presentations from the tech lead side. and we really want to just show the user the new UI, show the users like new features and all of this kind of new functionality. Even more, I don't know, maybe we can show how does it work with the TensorBoard implementation. I'm not sure if we have like connection between TensorBoard and TFJob right now, but since we support TensorBoard in Kubeflow, I think it would be reasonable to show something how user can also use this UI to create a new TensorBoard, because this is related to the training, right? So if you have something in mind, it would be great to show, I believe, right?
Yeah, one last comment. I think, Kimona, I think that is a great idea. I think it will be really helpful for the community as such to basically go through each of them, right? Yeah, so I have to leave now. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, let me stop the recording. Thank you so much for joining today. And yeah, see you again next time. Thank you guys. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.